Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another tutorial video. My name is Pulkit Kudiwal and today in this video, you will be seeing how I made this edit that is on your screens right now. So without any further ado, let's get started. So this is the background image that I started with. I added the subject into Photoshop and quickly masked it out using the select subject tool. I lost some details in this process near his legs because of Photoshop's artificial intelligence system not working right. I added those details back by painting on the mask with white color. Most of the times I use the pen tool because it is mostly accurate, but sometimes when I'm being lazy, I use the select subject tool. It also works fine with me. I added the horse image and I did the same. I used the select subject again and it was very crappy selection as you can see. So I was removing the imperfections here with using the lasso tool. So as you can see, the hairs and the background, which is the tree image, are not very distinguishable between each other. So I used the lasso tool to do some random cutouts of the hair, which I'll refix later in the video. I don't like selecting part because it is usually very hectic and I easily get bored when I do selections. But I must say that the selection is the most important part of any composite. If you do the selections right, the image would turn out really great. Now it's a contradicting point that I should do better selections, but later ahead in the video I'll refine these edges, so don't worry about edges right now. I paint back the details that I lost during selection. As you can see, the hair looks really bad. So what I did is I used a fur brush to paint the hairs on behind the horse's layer. So I did it on purpose. I selected a color from the hair and painted it with the fur brush. The fur brush link will be in the description below. You can download it from there. It makes it very handy to draw hairs. The hairs were looking really bad and I used the fur brush again to refine the mask. Now coming to his tail, so I again use the same fur brush in order to mask out the tail's hair. So this is just basic refinement until I reach a point where it looks realistic and blended to the background. Again, I removed the saturation of the green color of the grass so that it looks like it is from the background that I'm using, because the background has a brown grass here. Then I added the saddle image which is from Pixel Squid. The link will be in the description below. I quickly masked out the elements that I don't want into the saddle, and to make it look like it is sitting on the horse, I decreased the brightness of it. And using the drop shadow, I added some shadows, the contact shadow, onto the saddle. The drop shadow works really well sometimes. I use it often, very often. Then I painted some shadows onto the left hand side of the saddle because it makes sense that there is no light which is illuminating it, so you have to put some shadows onto that. And the shadow color is sampled from the horse's shadows. The darkest point on the horse will be the darkest point on the saddle, which makes sense. I removed all the elements and came back to the background image just to add some kind of depth to the background. I used a gradient, blue color gradient, to add some blues into the background which don't make sense right now, but as I will change color grading anyways in the future, like in ahead of the video you will see what I do. And I will recommend you to stick around with the video because at the end of the video I'll be giving you some tips on how to blend and some presets to use in your composites for color grading. I painted some shadows onto the man as well. Then I did some kind of adjustments into the background layer so as to make it more interesting. Then I found this image of the uniform of the Witcher. This is from Witcher 3 Wild Hunt game, and I found it on Pinterest. You can search, this is just one search away, you can search it on Pinterest and you'll find it. I masked it out and I wanted it to look good, like it's worn by the subject that we are using, so I was very accurate with the masking at this time. So what I did was I cut out the legs separately, hands separately, and his chest separately, and then put it on the subject layer just to make sure that it looks more realistic. But this is not the only approach to do this. This is very hectic and I don't recommend you to do this. I would recommend you to just head swap on to the uniform, which will look same as the results that I am getting. A lot of playing with masks, and then to find the perfect solution for the uniform I need to do a lot of refinement. So I'll not recommend you to do this. I'll just recommend you to head swap your head into the uniform. So I did that separately for every part. I will not show it in this video. So after a lot of adjustments here and there, we finally have the man with the uniform. And then I painted some shadows, some kind of shadows. The shadows are painted the same way. You can sample the darkest point in the background and then paint some shadows using the brush. Then I added some highlights to make it look realistic. So I sampled the highlight color from the background and started painting on the edges of the horse. Now this is a part of blending. I would recommend everyone to do this because it makes the effect sell. So I use the curves and uplift the shadows to give that smooth look, that fading look onto the horse, because on the previous background it has a lot of contrast. So as to remove that effect and to add a new effect, I did this. So I did masking again of the feet of the horse so as to look more realistic, so as to make it look more realistic that the horse is standing on the ground. And then I used the color balance to add some blues into the horse. I use the same process with the saddle so as to make it blend with the background as well. So you can see basically what I am doing is I'm trying to achieve the look of the background onto the subject layer that I am using. So always keep that in mind to paint highlights onto the edges first of the object, because when any light incident onto the object, the edges, which are the protruding part of any object, will catch the light first. So as to sell the realistic effect, you need to paint the highlights onto the edges first. So I use the fur brush again to paint the white hairs behind the black hairs, because the highlight is strong, the hairs will catch the white color. So as to sell the realistic effect again, I need to paint the hairs with the white color, which I am doing with the fur brush that is included in the description below. Then I did the same process with the uniform. What I did was I lifted the shadows, I lifted the midtones as well. So you can see I'm using curves for every adjustment that I make, because curves are the most powerful tool in Photoshop. So I did the same for the head as well, and then I used an exposure layer to get the white hair. I cranked up the whites in exposure layer and then used the mask to paint it, because the Witcher has white hair, so I did that. Then I painted the same highlights onto the main, onto the man as well, with the same color that the background highlights are. I'm painting the highlights only onto the points where it is necessary. Then I used a color dodge layer to paint some whites in his eyes, because in the game I played, the Witcher had white eyes as I remember it. I also added the long hairs, which didn't look pretty well, so I decided to remove it anyhow. So it didn't look good to me, I removed them. Then I used the fog brush to add in some mist around the forest, because it makes sense to add mist inside of a forest on a cloudy day. Then I started painting the shadows on the left hand side of the man, because there is no highlight points on the left hand side and it doesn't make any sense to have some highlights on his body. So now I was happy with the compositing part, I jumped onto the color grading part. It depends on the personal taste of a person, how he color grades it, but I'll add a PSD with my color grading, so you can use that color grading onto your edits as well. I was just messing around with different color lookup tables in this case to add more and more effect to the image that I was producing. Now, curves always play a major role in color grading. Then I added a sword image which is kind of stuck somewhere in the foreground, and I used a blur gallery to blur it out. So, and I found another image of a kind of a villain or something like that, a creepy monster, and I found it on Pinterest. This is also one search away. You can go and search Witcher 3 concept art and you'll find it. And then I blended it with the background and I blurred it with using the blur gallery. Then I tried using it onto the right side as well, but it didn't seem pretty good to me, so I decided to remove it. Then I added the shadows of this creepy monster here using the soft round brush. Then using the same process of highlights, I drew some highlights onto the monster as well. Then I added some kind of effect onto the eyes of the horse. I made it glow using the brushes. But I was finally happy with the image. I decided to use the camera raw filter onto this image. The camera raw filter is basically your personal taste, and it depends on how you want the image, so you can tweak the image into the camera raw according to how you want it. So after the camera raw filter, I was quite happy with the image and satisfied with it, so I decided to not tweak it further anymore, and this is the final image that we got. So thanks for watching the video. If you want to see any such videos in future, you can subscribe to my channel. Feel very free to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell icon to never miss any update from me.